Book 2 of Buck and Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my July wrap-up. Now, as I'm filming this, there are a few more days in July, but I probably won't read anything, or at least I should say won't finish anything by the end of the month. So, like I said, it was Jane Austen July, and again, I'm participating in it. I hope this is one I stick to participating in, because eventually there are times when I end up losing interest in a readathon because it puts a bit of a pressure on me. Not that anyone that hosts these readathon is forcing, because I don't really interact with anyone who hosts readathons that much. I mean, at all, actually. I might comment on a video or two, but I don't have a Discord or Twitter or Tumblr. I mean, I do technically have a Tumblr, but I don't use it. And I'm not on Facebook, and most people don't really use Facebook anymore. So I'm not very interactive, except for actually doing the reading and trying to comment on videos and watch the videos that have to do with the readathon. So it's not like anyone's forcing me, but I still want to participate in these readathons, but at the same time, like I said, there is a little bit of pressure that I sometimes will feel a little bit of pressure, because I end up not wanting to read a book that has anything to do that would fit the readathon at times. So anyway, this is my third or second time doing this readathon. I don't remember if it was last year I started, or in 2022 that I started to participate in. I don't remember. But this year I read 4 books. And I did attempt to try to read some other stuff as well, and I will talk about that a little bit during this wrap-up. But so I decided to start the month with a retelling of a Jane Austen novel, because I meant to do it last year, but then I never got around to it. And that probably is partly to do with, I think that last year was also the year I read The Other Bennet Sister, and that is a very long book. But Hearthstone by L. Catherine White. This is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice with dragons and hobgoblins and mentions of trolls. And so it follows the Pride and Prejudice story, but with the addition of the Darcy character and Bingley characters, they're dragon riders. And Elizabeth, and that's kind of only people of the upper class can be dragon riders in this society. The class that the lower middle class, or the middle class that the Beltanes, because they do change their names, they can't be dragon riders. And there is the added plot point that is mentioned in the back description, that one of her name, Elizabeth's character's name is, I still don't know if I'm saying it right, but Eliza or Eliza. I would have to listen to the audiobook version of this to know how to pronounce the names, but her sister, one of her sisters, got killed by a does it say what killed her? By griffins. Oh, that's the other magical creature that the story includes. Griffins. They are kind of like the monsters of the story. Her sister was killed by a griffin. Does it say which sister? I cannot remember which sister. But so she kind of now, she doesn't she has a little bit of PTSD about it. Even though, she's told by Alistair Dare, who is the Darcy character, that she could be a dragon rider, even though she's not of the right class, she has the warrior spirit. She doesn't want it. The idea of killing, even if it's a literal monster, is not her cup of tea. She does not want to do that. And this, so this one, well, first let me talk about the stuff I liked. First, I liked that I always loved the idea of taking an historical story and adding fantastical elements to it, giving it a fantasy spin with magical creatures, or magic is real, or there's time travel or something like that. I always think that is a really fun take on the story, and see how the author can creatively take the elements of the original story and add these unique elements that you wouldn't normally see in that type of story, and seeing what they do with it. Because you can get really creative when you're adding fantasy or science fiction elements to a story like this. You can really have fun with it and find ways to include those elements and combine them with original plot points. I think that is a mark of a really creative writer, in my opinion. So I really love that. I mean, another favorite retelling of mine is Tooth and Claw, which takes Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and again, we're dealing with dragons here, but the characters are the dragons. And granted, I had my imagination in trouble adjusting to the idea of these characters as being literal dragons and doing the things that they do in the original Pride and Prejudice with creatures. I still had a little trouble with that, but it is one of my favorite books, and I haven't reread it yet, but I mean to at some point. And I also like that Eliza was an artist, that she could sketch. I thought that was a really cool addition to the story. Instead of her playing piano, she was an artist. In that she was a sketch artist. I thought that was a nice little change that White did. And I also like that the dragons, because they kind of reflected the personalities of the characters, it sometimes allowed certain characters to not be as bad and as annoying, as unlikable as they are in the original novel. It toned them down because the dragons reflected their emotions. And we also get characters that get to redeem themselves by the end of the story. The characters that were horrible, selfish people in the original novel got to get a second chance to be a little bit better. And I think there's a little bit of a more emotional journey for the characters, because the stakes are even higher in this book. Not that they don't have high stakes in the original novel, because like if the Bennet sisters don't get married, find husbands, then they're gonna be in poverty. They're gonna be out on the street. They're gonna have to answer to their cousin, who's a sniveling prick, ass kisser type of guy. And so yeah, for them that is high stakes. But in this, because it goes beyond just their little group, the stakes are even higher, because their village could be affected. There's monsters out there, like literal monsters, not just mean people or snobbish people, but actual monsters are threatening them. And like one of the sisters, we're told in the beginning of the book, got killed. I also, so it really, there's of course a big epic battle towards the end, towards the climax. And I mean, that's why I love fantasy. I always in the end go back to fantasy because of all that. Even though right now I haven't read a lot of fantasy in the last few years, it feels like I haven't. Like I feel like I'm neglected, and I've kind of been more into the more stories that have like normal everyday dramas, like relationship dramas and stuff like that, and money problems and all that, like, or real life war going on historical wise. I've definitely been into that more lately. But I still will always go back to fantasy because I love the exciting plots, the more sensational plots, the plots where there's otherworldly things going on, there's magic and magical creatures and stuff. So it was really exciting. The climax part was really exciting, and the romance almost felt more amped up in this story. Like, it almost felt a little bit even more romantic than the original novel. And don't get mad at me if any of you are Pride and Prejudice. I still love Pride and Prejudice, but it's just, but at the same time, what I didn't like is the only thing why this is not a higher, I don't absolutely love this book. Like, I still enjoy it, and I'm going to continue to read the other two books because I still liked it. It still felt like it's Pride and Prejudice. I know the plot beats. Like, yeah, there were added aspects of, like, epic battles and magic creatures and all that, but it's still, like, it still hit the plot beats, which, I mean, that's partly why we love retellings. We love a retelling that still hits the familiar plot beats, but also adds different spins and different ideas and concepts. But I really appreciate ones that really kind of go on their own way and deviate a little bit. Like, I'm not gonna be one of those people that is like, you know, those people that where another author is inspired by a classic, you know, and then use it to write their own book and then be like, oh, they stole that, you know, their story, they just copy off of it. Like, I don't feel like that, because I know there's a lot, like the first book in the Wheel of Time, people say that it's a copy of, you know, Lord of the Rings, and which I disagree with, but I'm not gonna, I don't mean it like that, I just mean it still, you know, it still feel like it doesn't feel as different enough. Even though, yeah, it has a good amount of differences, like the, you know, it has the fantasy elements, but it doesn't deviate from the familiar plot of Pride and Prejudice, which, you know, some people, probably a lot of people like that. And it doesn't make it a bad book that it doesn't. It makes probably a very comforting book and a fun book. But for me, like I said, I would have liked it to deviate a little more from the original Pride and Prejudice, if that makes any sense. But either way, like I said, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to read books 2 and 3. It's only a trilogy, so even, you know, so that helps. Even if I didn't love it, it's only 2, you know, there's only 2 more books. Although if I absolutely hated it, then yeah, I wouldn't continue even if there's only 2 books. But because I still liked it and enjoyed it and had fun with it, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so then I got to my reread, because the only Austen I have not read yet is Lady Susan, and I do have it, but it's in that big Barnes & Noble leather bound edition, and that's kind of hard to carry around, and it's not fun to read that edition. That's more for aesthetic reasons, unlike the cloth bounds where they're small enough that I would still carry them around and bring them, but that's because there's usually one novel in them. While those big leather-bound Barnes & Noble ones have multiple, the authors, all their works, if not most of their works. And so that one's hard to travel with, and it's just a big book, and the printing is very minuscule because it has all her work in it, or her main novels in it. So it's very minuscule print. So it's kind of annoying to read from that one. And like, I would keep it for aesthetic reasons, probably, because I would, you know, but that's it. Like, so that's my only where her Lady Susan is in that one. So I would love to have a copy of Lady Susan, a separate copy of Lady Susan to read it one day. But I'm wary because I don't know how I feel about epistolary novels, novels that are entirely written as a letter. I don't know how I would feel. I mean, I guess it's the same as people that, the equivalent to that is those people who don't like novels, don't like plays that are rock operas where it's all singing the whole time. And there's the dialogue is sung. Like, I guess a book that's all letters, I don't know how I'd feel about it. I don't know if I don't know. I haven't tried it enough to determine how I feel. Maybe I would, if the characters were compelling enough, I'd be cool with it. So maybe it's not exactly the same as people that don't like rock operas, but I don't know. I don't know. I have not read it yet. And then I have not read her Juvenilia or Love and Friendship, which I guess that's part of her Juvenilia. But I haven't written. That's the only Austen I haven't written, and I don't have any of that, so I don't have access to it. Like I said, I do technically have access to Lady Susan, but I don't want to read from that particular book. So as of right now, I've been mostly rereading until I get access to those. Because last year I read Northanger Abbey. I think it was last year. It might have been in 2022. So that was the last one I hadn't read yet, and I read it finally, either in 2023 or 2022. But anyway, so I reread Persuasion, which is a more mature, at least quieter novel, I feel like. It's a second chance romance where this young woman, Anne, is told by her godmother Lady Russell to, he's not good enough for you and you should not marry him because he's not wealthy and he doesn't have his career is not good enough as far as status goes. So she rejects him, and then he comes back into her life when her father is forced to rent out their home because they're losing money, and he's a bit of a spendthrift. I think that's what it would be. So they're losing all their money, and Lady Russell suggests to your dad that they rent out the house. So he rents out the house to a captain, an admiral, and his wife, who actually knows Anne's former flame, Captain Wentworth, who is now Captain Wentworth. He's not just a sailor anymore, which I forgot to mention, he was a sailor. And he comes back into her life, and there seems to be bitterness and resentment, and he's moved on to this other young woman, Louisa Musgrove, and Anne kind of has to watch them court each other. And all the while she's dealing with her one sister her older sister being dismissive of her, thinking she's unimportant, and then her younger sister taking her for granted and constantly using her to take care of her kids because her sister's lazy and doesn't want to do it herself. And that's her younger sister. So this one, I feel like, is a little quieter novel. It's the most exciting thing, I think, is Louisa Musgrove taking a fall and putting herself in a coma because she's dumb and was all like, I'm gonna, walk across this, this wall, walk along this wall, and then she falls. It's like, and because I still think that was dumb. And I also cannot stand Anne's sisters, Elizabeth and Mary. Oh my god. Like I said, Elizabeth just dismisses Anne and thinks, oh, she's not important, or no one cares about Anne. And she's vain and spoiled and is unmarried, and I wonder why she's unmarried. And then we have Mary, who you think is more kind to her sister, but really she just wants to use her sister because she knows her sister will never say no. Her sister will always take care of her kids for her, because Mary seems to convince that, oh, I'm not a good mother. I can't take care of them. Maybe she isn't. I mean, it looks like she isn't because she doesn't even want to bother with her kids. She wants to go, and she finds them annoying. And I guess she's going to have to hire someone, a governess or a nanny for her children if she doesn't want to take care of them herself. Once you have kids, they are the most important thing. And so she automatically assumes it's like, oh, I'm not very good at taking care of them. You do it for me, Anne, because I'm a whiny little bitch. And I also, so yeah, I can't stand her sisters. I feel like we don't know a lot about Captain Wentworth. I think we know a little bit more of her other heroes, Edmund and Mr. Knightley and Darcy. And is that all of them? I think of, what am I missing? Oh, Edward Ferrars and Colonel Brandon. I forgot about those two. We know more about them, I think, than Captain Wentworth. I mean, we get a little bit of knowledge about Captain Wentworth, but I feel like we don't really get to know him for me to be attached to him. I mean, like, I do love the letter, like everybody else. I love that letter he writes to Anne at the end of the novel. That was really sweet and romantic and beautiful. And, but anyway, I feel like this is the one that I've read the most, more than read the most, and I reread the most, and I feel like it has grown on me over the years. It's still not my top. Emma is right now still up there at the top, still number one. But but this novel has definitely grown on me, and I've learned to appreciate it more, and I do feel like I relate to Anne in a lot of ways, her personality, not what happens to her, but her personality. Like, thankfully, I do not have a sister like either Mary or Elizabeth. Thankfully, my sister respects me. We have a great, loving relationship. She doesn't use me, and we respect each other, and she's not dismissive of me, and I'm not dismissive of her. We have a great relationship. We very much respect each other. So, thankfully, I don't have to worry about what Aunt Nellie has to deal with in this book. And I don't have to deal with the way her father is either. Like, like my dad is not vain. I mean, he does have a bit of an ego, but he's not Sir Walter Elliot. That's for sure. But yeah, I definitely appreciate this more. And, you know, any one of Jane Austen's novels, I love just reading her books. Like, the writing is so beautiful, and it's comforting in a way to read her books. And the way she crafts a sentence, chef's kiss. But yeah, I really, I enjoyed rereading this again. And after reading the last book I read for Jane Austen July, I definitely feel like I want to reread both Sense and Sensibility and Mansfield Park again. Probably Sense and Sensibility first, and then Mansfield Park, because I think I read Mansfield Park last year, reread it last year or the year before. I do not remember, but I remember rereading it recently. But yeah, so that was Persuasion, second book. And then I read Miss Austen by Jill Hornby. This is a work of historical fiction about Cassandra Austen. Now, the only time we ever hear about Cassandra and Jane's brothers is through books, through nonfiction works about Jane Austen, talking about her. And they will talk about her family, but we don't hear a lot about them. Like, even her brother James was a poet himself, and his poetry, people, unless you are a hardcore Janeite fan, unless you're like a Janeite, a huge fan of hers, you might never have heard that James Austen was a poet, which is brought up in the book. So this has two timelines. There's 1840, where Cassandra is an old woman now, or older, like maybe middle-aged, and then you have she is looking back through letters, fictionalized letters, actually. I read the author's note, and that's one of the things that is fiction in the book. One of the main, the letters are made up. Because we know that Cassandra burned most of the letters. And, in the book, Cassandra, in the present day, 1840, she goes to Kintbury, where, let me look at there's actually a family tree in the book, which I really appreciate. Okay, so who's Eliza Lloyd? I don't know how, because she doesn't marry Tom Fowl. He died. So I don't know how she's related to, I think Eliza is a cousin by marriage? I'm still... See, I'm confused by the family tree, how they're related, but how they are still connected, but I guess I don't know if they just remain friends, but she goes to the Kinbury estate, and for some reason, the letters, Eliza Fowl, married to Tom's brother, the letters Jane wrote between her and Cassandra and other family members, letters Jane wrote to other family members, are in Eliza's room, are somewhere in the house. So Jane has to get those, Cassandra has to get those letters and doesn't want anyone to see them. She's trying to protect her sister. She's the executor of her sister's estate. She's trying to protect her sister's legacy, and she doesn't want anything incriminating her sister's reputation or any of the family members to find out anything that is against them. So she's trying to get those letters, and she ends up also trying to help Eliza's daughters, because one of them, Isabella, she, from Cassandra's perspective, she is going to be a spinster. And so she's trying to help her deal with that, because if you know, Cassandra never got engaged and married anyone else. So she has been a spinster since, her whole life. Is only the only love she's known is between her and her sister and their mom. And the three of them lived together for years until until Jane and their mom died. And she's trying to help Isabella cope with the fact that she's going to probably be alone for the rest of her life, and maybe that, depending on her sisters, will be the best solution. And meanwhile, there is a maid in Isabella's household that doesn't trust Cassandra and is trying to, she's suspicious of her and trying to catch her in the act of doing something where she might be where it seems like she's interfering. And so Cassandra does get the letters and starts reading them. So we get bits and pieces of the past before Jane died, of what was going on in their lives at the time, and that's the other timeline. The timeline, of what happened before Jane died, the years before she. And we also get a little bit of the years when Tom was alive, and Cassandra and him were engaged, and when he goes on his expedition that gets him killed. So this is a very melancholy read. It's very much because if you know Jane, if you're a Jane Knight, or at least are a fan of Jane's, even if you're not a hardcore fan, you know the history and you know what happened to the family and everything. You know that Cassandra never remarried. You know that Jane died and she was only in her 40s. So she only read like 6 novels. She only has her Juvenilia, Lady Susan, and her 6 main novels. So there's a bittersweetness to the story. And you almost feel bad for Cassandra. Even though she is happy and content with her life and has no regrets, you almost wonder what it would have been for her if she had gotten married. And there is a potential suitor that she has in a flashback. Now, I don't know if that is true or not. I don't know how accurate that is, if she did have a potential suitor in mind. But it makes it a very sad book. It's still good, but it's just like a little heartbreaking. And I was, and and actually I was already kind of feeling a little of that sad, empty feeling I sometimes get when something's over that I really enjoyed, because, the whole Bridgerton season 3, all of that is kind of done for now until season 4, which is 2 years from now. So even though I can rewatch Bridgerton season 3 multiple times, I was feeling a little sad because, it's over, and and also knowing that the actors are going to be apart from each other because they're all good friends and everything, kind of made me. I was already feeling feelings of sadness. So it's like, which I know is silly because, like I said, we got season 4. The show's not done, and I can rewatch season 3 whenever I want. But yeah, I was already feeling like kind of that sad, empty feeling. And then I always get that way every time my mom goes to visit my grandmother or my sister when she's gone. I always get that empty, sad feeling because I'm always worried about her driving, and I'm already feeling the need to cry. I'm already getting emotional right now, so I'm not stop talking about that. But anyway, so let me talk about more like interesting things that won't make me cry. Get emotional. But the other aspect that I noticed is that Mary Lloyd, who married James Austen, who, like I said earlier, was a poet in the family, she reminds me so much of some of Jane Austen's other characters, like Catherine de Bourgh or Miss Norris. That vanity, that superiority, thinking, I'm better than everyone else, I have so much status, and you better remember your place, you're not as good as me and my family, you're beneath me. That kind of attitude. Mary reminds me of that, has that kind of attitude. And I don't know how accurate that is to who she really was. Like I said, I don't know which, the authors know, that's the only thing I remember, that it was mentioned that was made up. Those, the letters. The author note talks about the letters and says that is made up because we know Cassandra burned most of the letters that Jane and her exchanged. Which is kind of sad, but I understand why Jane did it, like to protect her sister. And it's known in who Jane's personal thoughts and feelings are none of our business. You know, unfortunately, we live in a society where now everything about any artist, whether you're an actor or a writer or a singer or a lyricist or a model, we know everything, almost everything about you. I mean, there probably are some things we still don't know, but their lives are now up for scrutiny. And, but back then, it was easier to hide yourself and keep your your personal life private. And considering how we treat people like celebrities or people that are famous, or you know, then I don't blame Cassandra for at this time worrying about that. Even though she doesn't live in our time, doesn't know how bad it can get. She probably has probably some idea of the potential, because I'm sure she understands human nature as much as Jane did, and how people can be. And I mean, Jane was still getting reviews and critiques in newspapers and stuff, so there was a sense of celebritydom in Jane Austen's time. So it's understandable that she burned the letters. It's just, as a fan of Jane Austen's work, it's kind of sad to think about. We won't know anything about her, but like I said, it's not my business who she is. So it's very, like, I have very conflicting feelings about it. Like, I get why, but at the same time, I'm like, I still, part of me, I'm not gonna lie and say, I do kind of want to know a little bit more about her as a person. So all we know is that the letters are made up, but I don't know if anything else in the book. I mean, it is fiction, obviously, but I don't know which aspects of the story are accurate, other than, Mary, Lloyd, and Cassandra Austen were real people, obviously. Like, these people that are mentioned in the book, their characters in the book are real, but we don't know, I mean, their personalities. I don't know if their personalities are accurate to who they were in real life. We will never know. And, but Cassandra, so I don't know if that's really who Mary was. Like, very well, she could have inspired some of Austen's characters. And there would have been people like Mary Austen. Mary Austen. There would have been people like her in real life. It is believable that she could have been that kind of person. But it's also really funny because, like I said, James is a poet, so she's constantly talking about his poetry and how it's superior to Jane's writing. Oh, people will forget about her novels. People won't care about her novels. And she's reading his poetry. Like, Cassandra decides to read to Isabella and her sisters one of Jane Austen's novels, her last novel that was published posthumously, Persuasion. She was trying to read it to them, and then Isabella actually gets into it. Even though she doesn't like novels, she starts to get into it and really enjoy it, and feels like, and really likes Anne Elliot. She's a fan of Anne Elliot as a character, and she connects with her. So she's really enjoying it, but as soon as Mary Austen arrives, she's like, oh no, we're not going to waste time on novels. We're going to read poetry because it will move you, and it will move you to tears. It's so superior, and it will always last. And I'm just thinking, really? You're, like, not everybody can get into poetry. Like, poetry's beautiful and wonderful, but not everybody, I'm sorry, but not everybody can appreciate poetry. Even if it's good, not everybody can understand it because it speaks in metaphors and symbolism. It's not straightforward sentences. It's not very accessible to the generic reader. Like, it's not for everybody. So there's no guarantee poetry is going to last. It's just be really good. And I can't, and the fact that I can't tell if Jane's would be considered good poetry. I can't tell. And poetry is also subjective. I mean, the same with novels, too. Of course, novels are subjective. But there is a reason that Jane's novels lasted, like, people don't know that James, unless you are really dive deep into Jane Austen and her history, you're not going to know about James Austen and his poetry. But people, even the regular person, the average person who might read a book once a year, is familiar with Jane Austen, has heard her name and knows about her, because her books are adapted into movie adaptations constantly. There's always every few years, there's a new adaptation of one of her novels. Because her books are accessible, a lot of people can relate. Everybody can relate to romance. Even if, a guy thinks of her novels as more girly and doesn't want to read a romance, he can still relate to the idea of falling in love. So her novels are relatable, and the insecurities of these women are relatable. And the way you write it, you can understand what's going on in the story, and you can follow along with the plot. With poetry, you don't always understand. It takes a lot more paying attention and understand. Like a novel, you can potentially read passively, while a poetry, you have to pay attention and figure out what the symbolism and, interpret and worry about interpretation. And yes, novels can be up to interpretation too, depending on the type of novel it is. But in most cases, novels last more. So it's just funny that Mary is like, oh, my husband's poetry is worth more. And she does have that tendency. You learn that she has a tendency to, flatter her James. She wants to flatter him because she wants to woo him and win him over. And it lasts through their marriage. Which is not always a good thing. Like, sometimes it's good to flatter your partner, make them feel good about themselves, and make them feel, and if they're a creator of some kind, make them feel like their work is good and special, and you like it and you enjoy it. Like, sometimes it's good to flatter an ego, but other times you don't want to inflate their ego to the point where they think they're the best thing since sliced bread with their work. They should be humble. And that, I guarantee you, it did not help. She was not humbling James. She was flattering him too much. But I can understand at this time, she's desperate to marry him. So it's like, she's got to, flatter him. I mean, if she means it really genuinely. I mean, maybe she meant it and really genuinely thinks his poetry is good and better than Jane's novels. Maybe that's her opinion. But it's just funny that you don't read people unless you are research Jane Austen. You're not going to know that James was a poet and that he was a writer like his sister. So, yeah. Anyway, so Miss Austen was really good. Like I said, it's kind of sad, but it's still it's a good book. And it's not that long either, so. And I really appreciate that we got a story about Cassandra. We don't hear a lot about her family beyond nonfiction works about Jane Austen. So we don't know what happened to Cassandra, and even this book is fiction. I do think the cover's pretty. I always like these purple flowers. I think they're really pretty, lilacs, or I don't know what they. But yes, so the covers are really pretty as well. So there's that. And then the last thing that I literally just finished right before I started filming is A Truth Universally Acknowledged: 33 Great Writers on Why We Read Jane Austen. Edited by Susanna Carson, foreword by Harold Bloom. This is not a library book. I got this in a used bookstore, so it still has the plastic on it. It was originally from a library, I think. Cumberland County, so from Cumberland County, I guess. This is, as it says, a collection of essays on Austen as a writer, and why people love her work, and how she's still popular even today. And some of the essays also talk about specific each individual novel, like Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, and Persuasion. There's in Sense and Sensibility. Well, all of them basically. And just analyze what we love about them and what we don't love about them, and why they're so important. And like, it talks about how Fanny as a character, she's not as beloved a heroine because of her being so good and so moral of a person that people just don't connect with her and just don't like her because she's almost too good. How how the romance between Anne Elliot and Wentworth and their struggle. And of course, why we love Elizabeth Bennet, why she's such a great heroine, or why, like, how, even though Austen believed that we couldn't love Emma, how people love Emma today, and, the whole premise of Sense and Sensibility, how one of the sisters, very sensible and practical and doesn't show her emotions, and then the other one is Sensibility, where she's very emotional, open with her emotions, and, like, how Jane Austen argues that, neither one of them is great, and that sometimes you got to find the balance between the two of them, and that you should have both sense and sensibility. And she talks about, like, let me look at the titles of each one. That should remind me what each one. The different, like, the comparing modern day women, the modern day elements of today versus what they were like back then in a lot of her essays, and how, and it also talks about how some of the essays also talk about why Jane she does not include world events in her time, like the Napoleonic Wars or anything like that. She doesn't include politics or anything in her books. Like, the Ansel part touches a little bit on it, but it doesn't go beyond mentioning it. And also, what's the other thing I was reminded of? Let me see if I look at. Let's see. I really appreciated the Nerds of Pride and Prejudice, where it talks about Mr. Collins and Mary Bennett. I really appreciate that, especially after having read and fall in love with Mary's character in The Other Bennett Sister. We talk about the perfection and the humor and the irony of Jane Austen's work. Also, I was thinking how, like, there's essays that talk about how, like, Jane never strays from focusing on the women. She does not. She has rules, creates subconscious rules for herself. She did, where she doesn't, not only doesn't talk about what's going on outside of her small community, the small community in each of her books, but also that she doesn't get into the heads of, she stays in the heads of the women, particularly her heroine. She doesn't deviate and get the perspective of the male characters. We don't get inside their head ever in her books. Because, she doesn't she probably understands women better than men. So she doesn't take that risk of trying to get inside a man's head. And, they talk about that she writes what she knows. That's also why she doesn't write about the world beyond. The last essay kind of talked about how, like, she seemed to be, it might have been the Virginia Woolf essay that talked about this, but how she seems, after Pride and Prejudice, she seemed like there was, if she had lived beyond her Pride and Prejudice, beyond Persuasion, then maybe she would have wrote novels. She could have potentially written novels that went beyond her own personal community and world, like her small world, that, that she could have written other stuff. And there is also an essay that even talks about how what the books do, what the movie adaptations do compared to the books, and how there's stuff that they do in the movies that they have to do in the adaptations as far as getting into an audience, getting them to be appreciated and enjoyed by an audience, compared to, like, in the books you can get away with not doing there's certain things you can get away with not doing in a book, versus with a movie you have to make them more exciting, and then there's more drama, there needs to be more drama, and then there's all the there's like the lighting and the costumes, they become costume dramas. Well, in her books, they were written in her present day, and they're less dramatic than the movie adaptations. But if you are a Jane Eyre fan, I think you should try this collection of essays. Like I said, there's a lot of them, but it really kind of dives deep into Jane Austen and why we love her, and looking and analyzing all of her novels and as the themes of her novels, and why she writes the way she does, and the things that she explores, and how, like I said, it talks about how she doesn't go beyond her own little community, her own little world, and doesn't write about world events and stuff, and how it talks about her humor, and how she's so good at irony, and also another thing I find interesting that some of these essays talk about is how she doesn't like, her romances aren't filled with a lot of passion. Or not physical passion. Like, there's the romance and the feelings, but she's not, like, she shies away from the passionate moments, while movie adaptations have no problem with showing them, making the characters come off as passionate. The only time characters get passionate is if, like, You know, when Darcy and Captain Wentworth wrote, you get their letters to their love interest, then that feels very passionate. But there's no, like, you know, sexy scenes, and there's, like, or at least not the way we see them today, not the kind of sexy scenes we see today. Like, we're kind of told that these characters are in love, and it's beautiful, and, like, yeah, they might share a kiss, but it's not described in detail like a lot of romance novels today. And I think Jane Austen is almost, in my personal opinion, it's almost a reprieve that you still get the romance without the really detailed descriptions of the characters' romance, you know, their intimate actions. Which, for me, over the years, the reason, part of why I don't always read a lot of romance is because you know, when I get those intimate scenes, I would rather watch them on the screen than actually read about them. Like, have them described to me in a book. I think that's part of why I'm not a big romance reader. But I am a romance watcher. But this is just a lot of really good, elaborate essays. They're not super long essays, but I think they really talk about things that you might be thinking of, or things that you didn't think of. That it might get those things on your mind when you consider why you love Jane Austen so much. Funny, yesterday at work, one of the people that works at the bookstore, the Gibbons bookshop, she was there, you know, at my store, and she always asks me what I'm reading, because currently if I'm reading anything good, and the first book that popped in my head was this one, because this is the one I brought with me to work to read during my 15 minutes. And, you know, I told her the title, not the whole title, but on why we read Jane Austen. She was like, you read Jane Austen, so you need to know reading a book that tells you why you read her? And I think she found it kind of amusing. So I tried to explain, but of course, you know, I'm bagging her groceries, so she wants to leave. And there's always another customer. So it's like, I don't really get a chance to totally, really discuss with her. And I'm working, so you're not supposed to discuss. You know, you're supposed to focus on your work. So I didn't get to really dive deep, but I did try to a little bit. It's a problem when people are asking me what I'm reading, because I personally need a little more time to really discuss it and explain, you know, why I think it's good and everything. Instead of just telling someone a title or giving them a brief 2-second description on my feelings or what the book is about. But anyway, so yeah, I definitely think if you are a Jane Austen fan, at least check it out, even if you find, because I know some of the reviewers on Goodreads found there was at least one that kind of found it lackluster, and was disappointed, which, you know, your opinion. I disagree. I don't think it was lacking at all. I think it's really good, really thoughtful, a lot of really great essays, a lot of known, like Susanna Clarke, Edward Bloom, and Virginia Woolf. A lot of good writers, you know, not just authors, but like writers, like journalists and stuff, like writers that are like journalists and all that, or non-fiction writers. But anyway, so like I said, if you're a fan, at least check it out. It might be interesting to you. So those are all the books I read for Jane Austen July. So I did attempt to read a non-Jane Austen related book. I tried to Kate Chopin's The Awakening, but it just wasn't for me. I appreciate what it's about and its message. I understand that. But I kind of got bored really quickly, and I think that can happen if, you know, I'm trying to make sure some of my books, some of the ones that I don't know for sure if I'm going to absolutely love them, I feel like I need to pick some of those up, the ones that I buy from the bookstore, the Gibbon bookshop. I need to pick some of those up and try to determine which ones are will be worth reading, because sometimes a book will stay on my shelf for years and I don't get to it. But yeah, The Awakening and Other Stories book stayed there a little too long, and then when I tried to read The Awakening, I was kind of bored. I mean, I didn't even bother with their other works, which I don't know, maybe I would have liked them, but it's like, I don't want to have it sit there and be like, oh, maybe I'll read it some other time. I'll try it again later, and then it sits there for years and never gets read. Because, you know, there, you know, people will say to me, oh, you never know, you might read it in the future. Like when I try to explain to them, it's going to be sitting there and I'm never going to read it. And they're like, well, you don't know that. I'm like, no, I know that. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. And maybe it's, you know, there's a phrase for it, when you, a self-fulfilling prophecy, that you prophesize that, oh, this is never going to get read, and then that's the case because you never read it. You're never. But I don't like the pressure, because I don't like to feel like, oh, I have to read this book at some point, so I better pick it up, and then decide, well, actually, I don't want to read that one. I want to read something else. There's a lot of books that, you know, I feel obligated and I feel like I should read, and then I end up not reading them because I'm like, because the moment where it's like obligation and feeling like, oh, this is something I should read or I have to read, then it doesn't, you know, I don't like that. I feel like that kind of ruins the appeal of that particular book. I'm also, so I didn't read those. I'm going to donate that book as well. And I also started reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is kind of basically Marcus Aurelius' diaries and how he was able to be a good leader and good member of the Senate, a good emperor and of Rome, and just his thoughts and how he remained diplomatic and remained like passive and not get hot-headed or get an ego. And you know, like he gets a lot of advice. As a kid, he got a lot of advice from family and friends. When I read so far, he lists all the things that he's learned from his father, both his father figures, his biological father, and then his father figure. That because I guess it was common that your biological father would send you away and someone else kind of adopts you. I guess it was common in Rome, but it's not a super long book, and like I said, it's like reading the person's diary. And even in the beginning of the book, they talk about how this was not this was just, it wasn't meant to be published, and it was just this Marcus Aurelius' thoughts in his, like, basically like his diary. So it's interesting that originally was just his diary and his thoughts and his meditations, as it is called, and now it's considered a nonfiction classic that people will read, maybe, and it does. And some of the advice seems to be very helpful. Some of the suggestions that he was told to do sounds kind of helpful. You know, like one of the things that I was thinking about is that reminding yourself that, yeah, there might be people that annoy you and piss you off, and people that are rude to you, and people that don't like you, and telling yourself that, yeah, I will run into those people, but basically don't let that get to me. Like, just accept that those people exist, that there will be people like that, but it's okay. Like, don't let it bother you, and don't, you know, not everybody's going to love you. Not everyone's going to agree with you. And people are going to annoy you. Not every personality is going to mesh well with yours. I think that's basically what that means. That just cope with that. And don't let it bother you. But yeah, some of the suggestions, I think you could just apply to life in general. So yeah, I'm reading that. I did attempt to read a little bit of the overstory. At least I read the first few pages. And I've already talked about that, so I have nothing new to say on that from what I talked about the last time. And because I haven't picked that up, and I ended up bringing Clash of Kings with me to work the first few days. Then when I came back after having 30 days off, and that ended up not, like, I was only reading like a couple. I only would get through like a page or two, so I didn't get a lot read. I mean, that's the problem with those 50-minute breaks. You only get 50 minutes. So, and then, like, it's all the way in the back, so I'm trying to get there and make sure I don't waste any of my time in my 50 minutes. And, I don't get a lot. And, so depending, in small print, sometimes I feel like when the book has bigger print, I sometimes read that faster. Like, again, and I think because of the size, helps a lot, while smaller print, which that's my smaller print, I read slower. I feel like, I don't know if anyone else friends that has this feels this way. Like, bigger print they read faster, and smaller print they read slower. But yeah, so I did attempt, but I don't have a lot to say because, like I said, I got through like a page or two. So, but I started reading it because I kept meaning to reread that book and start my reread of the first half of Storm of Swords, because that's the one I stopped at, where I only read half the book and I didn't finish it. And that was also partly inspired because House of the Dragon has been going on, and it's almost done actually, because there's only a few more episodes left. I think like two more episodes left. I ended up missing it, ended up not watching it last night, because I wanted to read, because I missed watching the previous episode, so I watched that first, and then I was waiting until my parents got home, and then they got home late, so I ended up not watching it, but I will watch it this week, at some point. But again, I'm very focused on certain other things, like it's Jane Austen July for one, and then I'm still kind of on the Bridgerton season 3 obsession. I still haven't, even now I'm kind of thinking about it, but I'm also feeling like, I should watch Dairy Girls, which stars Nicole Coughlan. I should watch that. And then I also have Avatar, The Last Airbender, the original, not the live action. And I'm also trying to be like, make sure I watch Max, other stuff on Max, not just House of the Dragon, because, like, we're paying for it, and, I don't want my money to go to waste. I don't want it to seem like I don't want it to turn out that I'm not watching it at all. Anyway, so yeah, that's how my read is. That is my wrap up, and also talking a little bit about how my reading is going right now. July's almost over, and then guess my nephews and niece are coming to stay with us because they're gonna do golf camp here. So, which means I probably won't read as much, but it will be fun. I'll be excited to see them in August and have them come and visit, because I wasn't able to visit them during the birthday, for their birthdays. We did visit them a couple weeks beforehand, we visited them, and we were there for a little while, but I was not able to go for either of their birthdays. So I'm excited to see. I will be seeing them next month. And then my dad is finally able to, talk about planning our trip to London. The problem is that him and my mom need to coordinate with her schedule and everything. And they need to talk about things, and Dad has all these questions, so plan things and everything. So it's just like, so we gotta, there's that. And so on the one hand, I'm like very excited because we might be going, but then on the other hand, I don't want to get too excited because I'm worried that something might happen, that once again we will have to cancel the trip, and then I will never go to London. Or I might have to wait until I get an opportunity, like with Terry or something. But anyway, so like I said, that is my wrap up, and I hope you all are enjoying your reading in July. I hope your July reading, it went well, and is there anything, would love to know what you are currently reading right now. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe if you have not already, click the bell icon below if you want to be notified, and also, like, you don't have to do any of these things that I'm asking you to do, like thumbs up and all that, but it really will help. And let's face it, I still want my channel to grow. I still want, but I will really appreciate if you all do give a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe, and click the bell icon if you want to get notified. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!